Welcome back. We have a lot of content to cover this week. Lots of happenings around the state, a lot of things happening nationally, and some local stories. We are going to talk about, as far as the state goes, the obvious. This past weekend, an incident occurred at Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson's home. We're going to talk about the extension to the pause order. We're going to talk about a couple national stories. We're going to talk about the senatorial race going on in Georgia, the runoff race. And we're going to talk about Rudy Giuliani because he cannot stay out of the media. And we're also going to be talking about an open congressional seat, possibly, in Ohio. And as a special guest today, we're going to have Michael Hogoboom, who is a co-host of the podcast I Can Marvel All Day. He's going to be talking to us about the connections between comic books and politics. So lots of fun for the show today, lots of content to cover. Thanks for coming. This is The Michigan Left, and I am Andrew George. All right, so first up, we're going to cover a local story. I know we don't do that often, but this one definitely warranted some attention. In the county of Berrien, that's in southwest Michigan, Ray Bell was campaigning, running for the seat of 5th District County Commissioner. On election night, now stay with me here, the results were a tie between him and his opponent. So obviously that, ensured a recount. After that recount, Ray Bell won by 4 votes. If that's not a surefire sign that every vote counts. I'm so proud of Ray. He's an incredible progressive, and he worked very hard for this seat. And it's worth noting that he is the first African-American person to be in that seat. I think he might even be the first Democrat, but don't quote me on that. So again, congratulations, Ray Bell, on a very close fought battle. You did great, and everybody's proud of you. I can't wait to see what you accomplish, and congratulations on being our progressive highlight of the day. Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson says dozens of armed protesters, they refer to them as armed protesters. I am going to refer to them as domestic terrorists, as that's what they are, descended on her home Saturday night using megaphones to disrupt what had been a quiet evening with her young son. It was meant to intimidate her, Benson said, adding that it didn't work. This is just past protest. This is a quote from Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. As my 4-year-old son and I were finishing up decorating the house for Christmas on Saturday night, and he was about to sit down to watch How the Grinch Stole Christmas, dozens of armed individuals stood outside my home shouting obscenities and chanting into bullhorns into the dark of night, intimidating her children. This is not protest, okay? This is dangerous and evil, and this is all a spawn of Trump's rhetoric and now what the Republican Party and conservatives, the far right, or even just the right, have latched onto and have accepted as their ideals. It's dangerous. In no realm is it acceptable to bring your intimidation, A, to someone's home, but B, to intimidate their children. It's just incredible. Hardly surprising, but just insanely terrible. Moving on, 59th District here in Michigan, that's in the southwest corner of Michigan. This past election was won by Republican Steve Carra, or Steve Carra, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. This is my home district, so I take this personally. It's no surprise that Republicans and conservatives do not take this virus seriously. And that's one thing, but Steve took it upon himself to post on Facebook that he and others gathered for a meal at the Daily Grind in Portage and Rise and Shine in Niles, stating, quote unquote, "It's a great time to stand up for freedom. Be brave patriots, we'll support you." No, you're just spreading disease and bad examples. You know, conservatives love to complain about these pause orders and, you know, having to stay home and, the tyranny, you know, this and that. But they're the reasons why we're still at where we're at. Just wear the mask. Don't go out to eat with groups. We could get through the virus. You're the ones causing the tyranny. You're the ones causing the pause orders. Until you jump on board, we're going to continue to go through this pandemic. And it's just going to prolong it and prolong it. Steve, I'm calling on you and every other conservative elected. Tell your constituents to wear masks and obey the orders so that we can make it through this. All right, we're going to move on to our last issue as far as state news goes, and that is the obvious. The pause order, the 3-week pause order, has been extended by 12 days. That's going to run through December 20th now. There's been some changes. I read my information today from the Detroit News. Obviously, I try to look all over the internet for many different sources. So, you know, that's obviously caused a lot of grief. But, you know, again, it's extended 12 days because elected officials like Steve Carra are influencing their bases to go against these orders, thus prolonging the pause order. Get on board and we can get through it. And I guess I'm going to report on that on every episode because something new comes out about that every time. All right, so moving forward, we are going to hear from Michael Hogoboom, the co-host of I Can Marvel All Day podcast. You can find it on all major podcasts. But before we do so, we are going to go to a quick break. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
The Watershed Voice is a community-first and community-supported publication bringing multi-generational content to Three Rivers and St. Joseph County. The Voice is built on a homegrown collection of contributors and staffers and is a platform for local artists and writers. Literature, poetry, and music are an essential part of the Watershed Voice mission and will augment traditional, unflinching news reporting. The Watershed Voice is available at watershedvoice.com, and Watershed Voice podcasts are available on all your preferred platforms. Consider a subscription or donation to the Watershed Voice today and support local journalism.
Hey friends, if I could just have a moment of your time, we'll get right back to the good stuff. But first, I want to talk to you about what we've launched in this past week, and that is a Patreon account. At patreon.com/MILEFT, that's patreon.com/MILEFT. You can find all of our episodes, you can find podcast versions of our episodes, and you can also become a supporter of our show. We love what we do here at the Michigan Left. It's something we're very passionate about, and that's progressive politics. But this all requires funding. Not a whole lot of funding, but it requires funding to keep this show going. And we're hoping for supporters like you to chip in even just $3 a month. That would help support the show and keep it running. So again, thanks for watching the Michigan Left. If you can go to patreon.com/MILEFT, that's patreon.com/MILEFT, you can become a supporter. You can also find some exclusive content at Patreon, as well as great merchandise. Thanks again for watching the Michigan Left.
Welcome, true believers and newcomers alike.
Dude, what's with the announcer voice?
Is that too much?
It's not enough.
Look for new episodes on Mondays.
Not every Monday.
Tune in to keep up with the latest Marvel news.
So my name's Shan and this is Hoagie.
And learn more about your favorite Marvel heroes.
Mostly just our favorite part.
Find us on your preferred podcasting app.
Are you gonna tell them what the name of the podcast is?
I Can Marvel All Day.
Do you think we got our message across?
Hey, we have a podcast called I Can Marvel All Day. It's about everything Marvel, and we hope that you will listen to us.
Cue the music track.
All right, welcome back to the Michigan Left. As promised, we are ready for our guest. We talked earlier about how comics and politics intersect, and if there are social messages within comics, and where those messages can be found. So again, please welcome Michael Hogoboom, co-host of I Can Marvel All Day. Hey, Michael, how are you?
Hey, Andrew. Nice to see you virtually here. I'm loving this box, this whole setup you have. It's pretty cool. I love this.
Yeah, I don't. See if I can touch the wall there. Hey, thanks for showing up. So tell us a little bit about the I Can Marvel All Day podcast that you co-host.
Yeah, for sure. So it's a podcast all about Marvel, which is kind of one of the, at this point in our history, one of the most popular pieces of pop culture. I mean, when the Endgame movie came out, it broke all the records. Previously Titanic had the, highest gross, and, it kind of took the mantle on that. So as far as pop culture goes, Marvel's, right there in the forefront. And, we talk about everything Marvel is kind of touching. So we might talk about toys one episode. We might talk about comics. We talk about the movies a lot because that is something people are familiar with. How do those relate to comic books? Video games, any kind of news. Hey, one time we talked about a Marvel cookbook that's coming out. So, just anything Marvel. And, the name I Can Marvel All Day kind of says it all, which, of course, that's based off of Captain America saying, I can do this all day. But we wanted the name Marvel in the title for search results, so we kind of changed it a little bit.
Oh, that's awesome. And I'm sure your podcasts are pretty much all over an hour, so I'm sure you cover every inch of everything you can with Marvel.
Yeah, what we do, we usually start the show, we say, how did you Marvel, since the last episode? And because we like to use Marvel as a verb, a noun, however. And so what we do is we talk about our personal, what did we do? And a lot of times we'll say, oh, we watched this movie because we were preparing for the episode or whatever. We'll talk about maybe a new video game came out and Shan was playing through it. We'll talk about news, or leaks, kind of scooper info, like behind the scenes stuff. For instance, just this past Wednesday in Brooklyn, they were filming the Hawkeye TV series under a fake name, of course. But, Haley Steinfeld was in there, and now everyone knows, well, she's playing Kate Bishop. So, that's news. Put that in the podcast. We'll release the podcast a week later, so everybody's going to know it by the time they hear it from us, because that's how podcasts go. But then we'll roll in. We'll do some fun segments, and we'll talk about the character for probably about a half hour, do a little like advertisements, and at the end of the show we usually do kind of a battle where we match up two characters and we kind of do an audio drama of a fight between them just for fun. That's us just totally nerding out, doing the geek thing right at the end.
Awesome. So when did you create the show? What was your inspiration to create this podcast?
Well, we started around the same time when the Watershed Voice media company started in Three Rivers, Michigan. It's a St. Joe County news and media company, nonprofit, community supported, and we wanted to be content creators for that publication. Giving people a voice. The idea of a publication where anybody can contribute. That was something that I really believed in. I wanted to do something for that. and what I like to do is podcasting. I threw around a couple ideas for different, subjects, and maybe getting a little more, serious subjects, things like that. But right in the midst of the first lockdown, with COVID and everything, is when we started. I thought, you know what some people need right now is an escape. I don't want to do a news podcast because it's not as fun, but that was part of it. Sorry, man.
No offense taken.
But it was like a little bit inspired to some escapism, but not so much that it's just nonsense. And we felt that Marvel Comics was perfect for that. There's some cultural conversations that can be had, but it's also a lot of fun. Anybody can listen. It's a pretty low bar. We try to explain everything, and we provide content and give attention to the Watershed Voice, let them advertise on our show, everything like that. So that was kind of, the inspiration. It kind of all went together. And ultimately, again, because of COVID and everything, it was hard to come up with a concept for a show where I might be interviewing someone. So it was really easy to do it with a coworker. We're already exposed to each other anyway. So it was like, hey, we can do this podcast together. What do you want to podcast about? And he said Marvel, and I said, yeah, sure. That sounds great. So
awesome. So that does lead me to my next question, because you brought up a lot of good points in that. And that is, in your opinion, does the comic book world and the political world intersect in any way? And if it does, does the comic book world and its following lean towards one direction or the other? What are your opinions on that?
Oh, man. You said this was only a half-hour podcast. You just asked me for a lot of content right there.
I just, do your best. Sorry.
So, yeah, no, of course. Let's see. You have the golden age of comics, where right in the midst of World War II was the height of comics. A lot of the comic book characters were fighting Nazis. That's where comics started from, and the idea of heroism and all that, and that evolved into stories that had, just like any storytelling and culture, there's like a moral or a lesson to the story. And because of the creators and who they were, primarily everybody knows Stan Lee. He would have this soapbox in the beginning of his issues sometimes, and somebody addressed it once. Why are you always moralizing in your comics? And he kind of said something like, escapism's great, but we're not going to bury our head in the sand, sort of thing. And that's how we feel about our podcast as well. Other times readers would press him to come out on issues such as the Vietnam War, and things like that. As far as characters, there's this great, if you really dig into the comic books, the movies are going to take what's going on in our culture now and what people want and kind of reflect that a little bit. But the comic books, there's so many of them, and they're through so many different points in history that it's beautiful. There's so many lessons. For instance, the X-Men. The X-Men came about, and during the 60s, they morphed into, well, they always were representation for minorities. Primarily, of course, in the 60s was the civil rights movement for African Americans. And the two characters, Magneto and Professor X, didn't start off this way, but ended up turning into sort of metaphor, allegory. What's the right word for when it's a character? But, Professor X was Martin Luther King Jr., and Magneto was a representation of Malcolm X. They had two different viewpoints on how they should fit into the world. The rest of the world hated them. And you have some really direct things, like you have President Nixon making policies against mutants. And you have the story of the JFK assassination, where they blamed Magneto for it. Later, you find out Magneto was trying to curve the bullet, trying to stop the bullet. And, because a quote from Magneto, he was one of us. And that says a lot about, that point in history, things like that. Along with X-Men, other than civil rights, some of the more modern movies, you have some LGBTQ themes. In X2, X-Men United, there's the one where the the kid is telling his parents he's a mutant, and you have that quote, "Have you tried not being a mutant?" You know, and that was an obvious sort of coming out to the parents sort of thing. You have this whole theme called the legacy virus at one point, where the government created a virus to try to destroy mutants, and it was basically a big allegory for the AIDS epidemic. And you also have a future, like a dystopian future timeline of the X-Men, where there are essentially concentration camps, sort of, for X-Men, and of course that relates to the Holocaust and everything. So that's one example of a comic book line that really talks about cultural issues.
Awesome. So, I mean, you're saying basically that politics has been embedded in comic books for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the author. You have different authors with different goals, different views, like whatever. And that's the thing, when you have so many, so much material, you as the reader can also choose what you want to read too. But you have Black Panther runs that were pretty much featuring how sweet his awesome powers were, and then you have Black Panther runs where it almost feels like, are these Public Enemy lyrics or is this a comic book? You know what I mean? So yeah, there's definitely some themes woven in. We have some upcoming episodes that I'm pretty excited about. So we're doing a holiday episode next and end of year, taking a little bit of a relax, a little bit. But once we get going again, and whether it's January or February, well, let me rewind a little bit. So when Chadwick Boseman passed away, we did a Black Panther episode. Well, Black Panther's the head of state in his country. He's the king of Wakanda. So then we're like, well, let's do another king. So we did Dr. Doom, which he's king of a fictional country called Latveria. And then we're like, let's do another king. So we did Namor, Prince of Atlantis. He's basically Marvel's version of Aquaman. I'm sorry, Aquaman is DC's version of Namor, if we're being honest about it. So, okay. and then we just run right into election season right there. And we're like, we're talking about all these heads of state. What's another one? Going back to X-Men, Kitty Pryde was a mutant. So a minority, basically a representation in comics for a minority. And she became the first mutant president of the United States. So let's talk about her. We're going to do an episode on her. But before that, we're going to do Captain America. And for a while, he wasn't my favorite character. I'm going to be honest. There's this about a 4-year period in our country's history where I didn't feel the most patriotic. So a character whose whole brand is patriotism wasn't that appealing to me, especially when I saw people around me blurring that line between patriotism and nationalism. But then when you really dig into the character, you realize, like I said, he started in the 40s. He's got those old school American values of what patriotism is. Yes, he believes in individual freedoms. He is a somewhat of a libertarian in that sense. He's also huge on being inclusive and equality, things like that. And sometimes he'll go on a soapbox too. And, a good example is right after 9/11 happens. There's a comic book issue where Captain America is sitting with some troops and they're about to go overseas because the war is about to start. And one of the soldiers made a sort of crass comment of, you wanted to kill some people, or, something like that. And Captain America put him in his, whoa. These are human beings. They're no different than me and you. We're fighting over ideals, but, they're still your brother. I can't remember the exact soapbox. But so what we want to do in this episode is talk about what is patriotism versus nationalism, because that's a theme. You have Red Skull, who is like, kind of the head of Hydra, which was a branch of the Nazis and all that. So you have, that's been a theme throughout Captain America the whole time. But let's talk about modern patriotism and how dangerous it can be sometimes, because the people that you see that you think of as patriotic might not necessarily agree with what Captain America says, despite the fact that they might put his logo on their truck or whatever.
Yeah, it would seem that nowadays the line between patriotism and nationalism is very blurred for a lot of folks.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm trying to explore that idea myself personally. There are some things about America, if we go back and look at things like the Statue of Liberty, what is that message? Hey, come on over here. Your country sucks. Hey, make a new home here, right? Do we say that nowadays? Think about the people who are most, there's there's patriotic people on both sides of the aisle. But when you think about the people who are flying the big American flags on their truck and, America this, America that, they're not necessarily welcoming to immigrants.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree.
So this is part of my own. It's part of my own like kind of personal journey that I want to explore this Captain America character. Shan and I, ultimately, it comes down to it. We do this show for ourselves. It just happened to get popular, and so that's awesome. That's fun. We love interacting with people too. But it's kind of like we're going off our own motivations there.
So, in what other ways do some comics promote ideas like acceptance and things like that?
There's a lot of material there, but another upcoming episode we have is Loki. And when you say acceptance, just came to mind right away. Loki's a character. A lot of people don't know this, but Loki's a character that's actually somewhat gender fluid. So he's a shapeshifter. He can take any form. Sorry, Loki can take any form. But another shapeshifter in Marvel is Mystique. People are familiar with Mystique. If Mystique disguises herself as William Stryker and she's found out, you would still say, oh, it's her, Whereas Loki, when Loki takes the form of Lady Loki, Loki is her. When Loki takes the form as a male Loki, Loki is him. And you have his father, Odin. Actually, here's one difference from the movies. What's her name? Hela is not Odin's daughter. Hela is Loki's daughter in the comics. It's kind of weird, but they change it for the movies. But in the comics, he has 3 kids: Angela, Thor, and Loki. And at one point, Odin's referring to his kids and says, I have 3 children, a son, a daughter, and one that's both. And it's just a really cool moment in comics where you have this like accepting father who, understands that his child wants to, his child identifies in different ways at different times. And it's not necessarily a disguise, but that's how Loki's presenting at the time. So in the upcoming Loki series on Disney Plus, I heard a rumor that Lady Loki might be featured. So maybe Disney will be exploring that. I'd be really excited to see that. But I think that's an example of, just something. You get people into comics and they're excited because of the fantasticalness of it, because of the escape, because of the fanfare and the superpowers and everything like that. And then, but you have good meat in there for like good cultural conversations. And I don't want to say you're like tricking people into like learning about something, but it's like a soft nudge. It's not an in-your-face aggressive, like I said, like a debate on Facebook is probably the polar opposite of talking about comics. But you have this whole community of people that are all in for this one thing, and they're reading these books and they're learning to be better people through that, instead of somebody getting in their face or accusing them of something or correcting them and embarrassing them. They're reading about it in something that they love. And we try to hold on to that a little bit with the podcast. And that's ultimately my kind of personal philosophy, is that people are going to learn, or people need to be ready to maybe let their minds be changed, or to, accept a new idea. They need to be ready for it. And if you come at them aggressive, they're probably going to shut you down. And it's not the main point of the show to just turn everybody into a progressive. But if we can do something that's a little relevant to culture, that's a little bit trying to, like, both me and Shan, we have different political views, but we both want the world to be a better place. And, neither, like, we want all people to be accepted and included. And that's something that's so beautiful about Marvel, like Comic-Cons, everything. On Instagram, there's so many creators. Everybody's so supportive and inclusive. And it's just a really great community. And I want our whole world to be like that. So the more people we can reach and have, like I said, these soft conversations where we're going to talk about Loki and we're going to talk about how badass Loki is, but we're also going to have a short conversation on this theme, and somebody's go, oh, I've always been a fan of Loki, but I never knew that. What are they going to do? Not be a fan of Loki anymore? I mean, it's just, so maybe that person maybe softens up a little bit on their traditional, conservative, religious, whatever views. And, through our podcast, maybe we're doing something good. I don't know. We're having fun either way, but I'd like to think that, we're doing a couple good things here and there. And ultimately, I think that's still, important, because people come to the table in different ways. And some people want it in a debate and some people don't, things like that. And, it's like that expression, everyone has a role to play in the revolution. And sure, sometimes I might be in a city meeting and say something straight to the point. We serve on a board together, and, sometimes me and you will have disagreements and we're going at each other. And there's other ways that, I kind of, contribute to the cause, I guess I should say. But, this is just one of the soft ways, and I really love it. And if we can, like I said, the community, we love supporting people, other creators, like lifting them up. And if we can inspire people to do the same thing and to say, this is something I'm good at. I'm not good at giving speeches. I'm not good at shaking hands and raising money. So I can't be a politician, but I'm really good at this thing. Is it a YouTube video maybe? Or you're good at, I don't know, knitting. Is there a way to make knitting to make a world a better place? I don't know. maybe not. Somebody out there could have that idea. But I say stick with what you're good at. And, because I've been doing media production since I was like 12. And, go with what you're good at. Go with what you like, what you enjoy, because sometimes it's not always fun all the time. But do something that's rewarding. And, you're going to do it for a longer period of time versus forcing yourself into, if you're someone who's not naturally inclined to be a politician and you run for office, you're going to get exhausted.
I can attest to that. So we're going to wrap it up here. I really want to thank you, Michael, for coming on the show today, and giving us insight in where comic books and politics, cross paths. I want to thank you for all that you do for the movement in your own ways, and I think it is significant. You've taught me a lot today about, the intersect between comics and politics, and I just think it's amazing. So the last thing I want to ask is, how can our viewers support I Can Marvel All Day's podcast?
Well, currently I'm going to go with, start with the biggest need, which is to support the Watershed Voice, which is ultimately, the goal of our show. Right now, the Watershed Voice does need funding, and you can support that by watershedvoice.com/donate. Support local journalism. Don't let it die in small town America. Newspapers everywhere are, small towns everywhere are losing their newspapers, and this is a new model. And very passionate about it, and that's, our podcast is part of that network. But hey, check out our link tree. If you go to any social media, you can check out our link tree. We do have a donate button as well. There are costs to our show. We have hosting costs, we have equipment costs, things like that. If you'd like to donate, or just give us a listen. Send us a message, engage us in conversation, challenge us, things like that. We love interacting people. Ultimately, like I said, we're doing this because it's a hobby and it's fun for us. So, and we want to talk to people. So that can be really supportive too, if you don't want to give financially. But, like I said, all of what we do is one, to have fun and support the Watershed Voice at the same time.
Incredible. So we will be posting a link to the Watershed Voices website in the description, as well as a link to the link tree for I Can Marvel All Day. Again, thank you, Michael Hogoboom, for joining us. Everybody, I encourage you to tune in to all your major podcast networks to I Can Marvel All Day with Michael Hogoboom and Shan. Thanks again, Michael.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Had a good time.
All right, so we are going to move on to our last segment, which is the national news. Thanks for sticking around. I know it's been an incredibly long episode with a lot of content. So we're going to move right along. The first thing is Georgia. All eyes are on Georgia right now. There's an obvious Senate runoff down there, and you've heard it exclusively here. I received info today that paid canvassers are flocking to Georgia right now. So the Republican candidates for Senate in Georgia cannot be bothered to even show up to a debate. They are represented by empty podiums, but they'll use their corporate donor dollars to pay for canvassers to come knock on doors. The reason is clear, is because they don't have a winning message, A, and B, they might incriminate themselves live. They just can't do the live thing. They don't want to talk to people. They can't be held responsible. So make no mistake, it is important that we pay attention to Georgia. We offer our support down there to the Democrats as best we can. There's a lot at stake here, so we want to win those couple Senate seats. All right, moving forward. According to BusinessInsider.com, Trump is reportedly planning a made-for-TV exit on Air Force One from the White House to a rally on Inauguration Day, hoping to pull viewers from Biden's inauguration. He's so childish. Not a whole lot to report here. Clearly, he just wants to take away from Biden's inauguration for childish reasons. But I'm almost certain that he's going to announce his campaign for president for 2024. And when he does so, the Republicans are all going to jump on board. He owns the Republican Party now. He owns the Republican Party. They're all going to jump on board, and he'll have his run in 2024. That's my theory. That's my thoughts on it. And I'm sure that we'll hear that on Inauguration Day or the day after, because hopefully you will tune into the inauguration and hear about Trump's ridiculous tantrum the next day. All right. Also in big news, Rudy Giuliani has tested positive for COVID-19. This is not a joking matter. The reality of the situation is this. Trump, the far-right conservatives, Rudy Giuliani, Trump's circle, they've all promoted the idea that COVID isn't serious. They've all promoted the idea that having to wear a mask is tyranny and it's all oppression. All right. Well, we look, and for weeks, months now, Trump's inner circle has been one after another being infected with COVID. The proof is there. So if you're going to listen to Rudy Giuliani or you're going to listen to Trump when he tells you that COVID isn't that serious, why don't you look at the actual evidence? Look at Trump's circle. Look how many of them have gotten COVID because they didn't take it serious. Look at the people who are being infected. There's a reason why scientists and health officials ask us to wear a mask. It's because it works. It's because it works. There's proof. There's evidence. It's right in front of your face. I hope that, if you're a Trump supporter, or, you just don't believe in masks or science, maybe you take something from this and, you help somebody else. If not for yourself, wear a mask for somebody else. Okay, lastly, the last thing I want to touch on is Representative Marcia Fudge from Ohio's 11th District. She is a U.S. Congresswoman, and according to Politico, she is likely to be appointed to lead the Department of Housing and Urban Development. She is in the top pick for that position for the Biden administration. If she chooses to accept that position, that would leave her seat for the 11th District vacant. With that being said, District 11 in Ohio is home to none other than Nina Turner, co-chair of the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016. I think maybe 2020 as well. I'm not sure there. Incredible progressive. So I would look for that, see where it goes. She hasn't said a whole lot about it yet, but it seems like she's hinting towards a run. So we might get another incredible progressive in Congress. So we will see on that. All right, so that is it for today's episode. I just want to thank you all for tuning in every week. It's such a blessing. I'm so happy to be able to do this and bring you progressive content and talk to you about progressive issues all around Michigan and some nationally. So again, thank you for tuning in. I hope to see you next week on The Michigan Left with myself, Andrew George. Thanks.